This must be time for the sermon. Grace to and peace from God our Father and our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. The text is the last part of the gospel lesson. Martha, Martha, you are anxious and troubled by many things, but one thing is necessary. Mary has chosen the good portion, which shall not be taken away from her. So far the text. Dear friends in our Lord Jesus Christ, a good friend of mine, a neighboring pastor, had a funeral that he conducted one afternoon or morning. And the lady who died was named Martha. I think he chose this particular text as his third sermon text. Well, as he was preaching along, he started to call the deceased Mary. An easy enough mistake to make. And as he's calling her Mary, he notices that the family in front of him was just kind of shaking. He thought, boy, they're really in grief, aren't they? And so he doubled down on his preaching and talking about Mary. And the more he did, the more the grief showed itself. And finally, one of the family members whispered, "Her name's Martha." He couldn't quite hear, so he leaned a little bit more. "Her name's Martha." And he said, "I'm sorry, I can't hear you." She said, "Her name's Martha." Well, Mary and Martha, sisters, sister of Lazarus, in fact, had this important person in their home. Now, there's just reading the scripture, it's hard to confuse Mary and Martha because they're so different in their temperaments. Martha, on the one hand, was a very devout, culturally aware woman. It was probably her home. Martha was a tenant or visitor, whatever it might be. But Martha was concerned about keeping the customs of that particular time, which was serving the guest was the most important thing. Everything else paled in comparison. And so she busies herself about cooking the meal, preparing the table, perhaps doing a little bit of last-minute cleaning. You know how it goes, the busyness of company and all that entails. And she's working herself into a frenzy while thinking at the same time, there's my sister Mary. She's doing nothing. She's being lazy. She's making me do all the work. How dare she be in such a manner? And as Mary is working herself up, she's becoming more and more frustrated, more and more angry, and finally she goes to Jesus and says, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me here to serve alone? Tell her to help me." And you would think that Jesus, being culturally aware himself, would say, "Yes, you're right, this Bible study can be held off for a little bit while. Mary, go help Martha." That's not what Jesus said. He kind of scolded Martha. "Martha, Martha, you're concerned about and troubled about many things. You're troubled about me being here. You're troubled about doing the work that is set before you. You're troubled about many things. Relax. Mary has chosen the right thing, that which is most important. And that right thing will never be taken away from her." Today's text begs us to listen to God speak to us in his word. And it begs us to listen with a particular thought in mind. and that is how precious God's Word is to us. We belong to a church body that prizes education, Christian education, above all things. We have preschools where children learn about Jesus. We have pre-kindergarten programs, kindergarten programs, schools for grades K through 8, and in some locations 9 through 12. We pride ourselves on having 12 superior universities and 2 superior seminaries. We stress education in having Sunday schools for our children, confirmation class for young adults, Bible study for youth, and Bible study for adults. And we take great pride in having those educational opportunities so broad and so expansive. But there's something missing. Something very crucial missing. There's an expression that says, Jesus taught the adults while he played with the children. We, on the other hand, teach the children while the adults play. One thing missing is simply adults in Bible class. Think about it. Each week, some are excluded in most places, although here you have adult Bible class in the summer. Good for you. In most congregations, adult Bible class is offered on Sunday morning. And in most congregations, the attendance is abysmal. It's hard for me to wrap my head around the fact that God gives us the invitation to learn from him by studying his word, and so few adults take advantage of that opportunity. There's midweek classes too, and dare not neglect midweek classes, which is a fine opportunity for adults to gather together and hear God's word, take it to heart, and learn from it. And I commend those who attend both or either Sunday morning or weekday Bible classes. It's good for the soul. But not only is it good for the soul, it's good for the marriage. It's good for the family. And it's good for the congregation. I'm interested in church conflict. I shouldn't, because I'm conflict avoidant, but I am interested in church conflict, and occasionally find myself at a conference that is held by a group called Ambassadors of Reconciliation. The leader of the group is a man named Ted Kober, who has over 20 years of experience in church conflict and helping people, congregations, resolve their differences. And he's noticed over time that when he does his interviews with the congregation, particularly with the leaders of the church, that in conflicted congregations, there's one commonality. It doesn't matter what the conflict is over: the constitution, the structure of the congregation, a church member, leader who has committed adultery or some other sin, the pastor or a professional church worker caught in sin himself or herself. All those things are devastating to a congregation's life. It doesn't matter if the church is being sued for some kind of negligence. When there's conflict that happens within a congregation, and he's called to intervene in the conflict, he finds there's a common denominator with unhealthy congregations that don't know how to resolve conflict themselves. And that is, quite simply, low attendance in adult Bible class. On the other hand, he did a study of healthy congregations. He contacted district presidents from all the districts of the Synod and asked for the most healthy congregation that they have within their district. And so the DPs sent out They identified the healthy congregations. And Ted gathered the statistics. He met personally with the pastors of those congregations. And without asking specifically about adult Bible class, almost to a person, the pastors said we have a strong adult education program. And he noted that where the congregation had a strong program with a 25 to 30% attendance in Bible class, the congregation was more healthy than those that did not. In fact, he said that he has rarely seen a congregation that is healthy that does not have a strong adult education program. It just doesn't exist. Now, that doesn't mean that every congregation, of course, that has low attendance in Bible class is going to be unhealthy and full of conflict. But his experience is that there's a correlation between adults in Bible class and the conflict resolution within the congregation. And when there's conflict resolution that the congregation can handle itself, it's a healthy congregation. And along with that is more apt to be involved in outreach to the community as well as ministry to one another within the congregation's membership. It's an important thing. It dare not be neglected because it has so much benefit personally, familially, and congregationally. It has something to offer. There's a little passage that St. Paul wrote to young Timothy, a young pastor. And he said simply, read, mark, learn, and inwardly digest what God has written or has given to you. There he's not talking about the New Testament because it hadn't been correlated yet. But he's talking about the Old Testament. Read, mark, learn, and inwardly digest what God has revealed to you and to the rest of his people. And what is it that's revealed in the Scriptures? The heart and the core of it is the simple good news. Jesus died, and he rose again. He ascended, and one day he's going to return once again. That's the message that the church proclaims and preaches in pulpits, at lecterns, in classrooms, and hopefully in Bible study. Because that's the thing most necessary, the thing most needed for God's people today and every day. Is to gather at the feet of the Master and learn from him. And in learning, become stronger in faith, stronger in witness, stronger in service, and stronger in love for one another. May that be so for Jesus' sake.